Hello, welcome to the Wallifornia MusicTech 2020 Virtual Summit. It's already our last edition before the demo day of the Acceleration Program. And what a session, MusicTech and Education with Yvan Boudillet, founder at The Link, and Panos, Panay, SVP for Global Strategy and Innovation at Berklee College of Music. Guys, thank you very much for being with us, and the stage is yours.
My dear Panos, it's been a while. Last time we spoke, it was South by when we could gather all together. I'm really pleased to take the time today to just interview or this kind of fireside chat with you. I will start this conversation by asking you, can you give us a little bit of background for those who don't know Berklee institution about what Berklee School of Music is about, not only the history, but also the innovation part and your role within this prestigious organization, and then we will.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Yvan. And indeed, last time we met was at a coffee shop in Austin, Texas. It feels like a galaxy far, far away. So yes, Berklee was founded in 1945, in fact, by an MIT graduate. So there's always been a strong connection between technology and entrepreneurship and music at Berklee. And it was founded on a very different premise at the time, which was that it was based on the concept of teaching the music of the day. So unlike a traditional conservatory that was focused around teaching of music of the past, if you will, the whole idea was to help students at Berklee learn what was contemporary music. And that concept, I think, has been embedded into the DNA of Berklee since then, which means that evolution and constant change is part of what we do. Since then, almost 75 years ago, Berklee has grown quite a bit. We have right now about 5,500 students on the Berklee campus in Boston. We also have campuses in Valencia, Spain, where we have several of our master's programs. We just opened a new center in Abu Dhabi, literally right before the entire coronavirus thing broke out on February 29th. We also have a campus in New York City where we took over the legendary Power Station studio, where big artists like Bruce Springsteen and Madonna and the Rolling Stones recorded a lot of their iconic albums. Under Pressure by Queen was recorded there. The Hamilton soundtrack was recorded there. And we're actively pushing forward with a presence in China as well. Also, unlike a traditional music school, Berklee offers all kinds of different majors, including music business, music therapy, sound design, music production. We're about to launch a new program in live experience design. In terms of my job, I think I have the coolest job in the whole college. I'm in charge of our institutional strategy, as well as any new technologies and any new markets that we push in. And I personally oversee all the campuses outside of Boston. So Valencia, New York City, Abu Dhabi, a network of over 25 global partners, as well as being in charge of pushing into China. So it's a fun job and a fun place to work in, embedded and enmeshed in creativity.
Yeah, we have a great bunch of people around. I'm familiar to the Valencia campus since I've been lecturing here with Emilia and the guys. So yeah,
Yeah, and of course, I forgot to mention that we also have a very large online school, which has been
Yes.
around for almost 20 years now. We've been pioneers, not just in online music education, but in online education with over 11,000 students. And also, since 5 years ago, we've merged with the Boston Conservatory. So now we also offer dance and theater in addition to music.
All right. Thanks for this overview. I think it give a perspective of how important, I guess, Berklee plays a role in this music world. I think across different silos, because usually we used to talk about musicians, artistry, and music business, and it's all across those disciplines. First question for you, Panos. Let's say being the cradle of most of the smartest musician or musician all across the globe and music business people. How do you consider adapting the skill set as a school? What kind of skill set are you trying to give them to navigate this moving music world, both for musicians, I would say, and let's say more music business oriented people? And then we're going to talk about what kind of instruments or platforms you develop to do that. But before the skill set itself.
Yeah, I think like every industry, higher education is undergoing an enormous change. Clearly, the coronavirus has accelerated that change, and in my opinion, just like every other industry, it's been accelerating that movement towards whatever these next chapters are by 10 years.
Yeah,
and I frankly see it as a good thing. Especially with respect to so-called music education. The truth is that since about 10 or 15 years ago, there's been, if you will, a movement towards giving students skills beyond just traditional performance. And arguably, Berklee, since its inception, has been focused a lot on the practical application of your talent rather than simply the artistic expression of that. I joined the college after I sold my company, Sonicbids, in 2013, to in fact start an institute called Institute for Creative Entrepreneurship in order to bring the entrepreneurial mindset to music students. And the philosophy that we've pursued is that, in fact, the two are very closely related, because entrepreneurialism is, in fact, in my opinion, a creative discipline more so than an analytical one. So we've developed a methodology of building these mindsets by, in fact, tapping into our own students' creative instincts. So if you think of the ability to collaborate, to improvise, to present, to synthesize information, to pay close attention or listen to your environment, these are, in fact, inherent music skills. If you cannot be a good musician unless you're a good listener, you cannot be a good musician unless you're a good collaborator. Well, similarly, you cannot be an entrepreneur unless you pay attention to the changes around you. You cannot be an entrepreneur unless you're able to bring different people together to create something new, something different. And you also cannot be a good entrepreneur unless you're able to course correct and change based on the inputs and the reactions that you're getting, similar to the way that if you're a musician and you're on stage, you got to be able to adapt and change, either based on the actual musical chord changes, if you will, if you're improvising, or on the reaction of the audience, right? So we tie the two things together. The other thing is that we're pushing very hard into new technologies. So what impact will, say, augmented reality or virtual reality have on the creative narrative? What impact will AI have on our ability to make or compose music, or use data as a means of informing how we approach our careers? arguably, technology has been closely related to art from the beginning. As a matter of fact, there is no such thing without the other. I like to say that the first person that took a piece of skin and stretched it across a hollow container and created a drum, well, that was a piece of technology. And being originally from Cyprus and Greek being my first language, technology, or technologia in Greek, literally means the deep study of art. So we at Berklee, again, since the inception of the college, we've looked at technology as a key platform for the creative expression. Being the first college that ever taught music synthesis or sound design, music production, film scoring, and other very closely technology-driven majors, we make it part of our core curriculum to indoctrinate technological skills to our students, every much as we do for artistic skills or hopefully business skills. And for me, these three, what I'll call the ability to be trilingual, I think is critical actually across all three disciplines. If you're a business person, you got to know technology and you got to be creative. If you're a creative person, you got to know technology and you got to know business. If you're a technology person, you got to be creative and you got to know business. So for me, the future will belong to people who are able to speak these three languages. And that's what we're focused on.
Super interesting, this triangle. Interesting also, we speak about language because we have another talk just before that one, which is not related, so to speak, but it was also, we talk about Babel Tower, the need for interoperability within across the industry. Like we should talk the same language, but here it's all about the skill sets. Another question going along with what you said. There is, and you know that really well, there is a booming offer of services to artists and musicians offered by startups all around the globe, which is great, amazing. But I would say also from your Zen, does it change your perspective as a school in your mission? Seems like you see this kind of disruption discussion that has been all around for traditional industries, like a label, a publisher, a live promoter, being like challenged by the rise of startups on the side load. It seems to me that you embrace that technology, but how do you consider like the intrusion or the contribution to startups in your curriculum? Or you see what I mean? As a school, because also one of your job is to approach the strategy of a school. So does the mission of Berklee has changed over the past 10 years, or it remained pretty much the same?
Well, my view is that your mission ought not to change in the sense of however you define your mission, it has to be broad enough, ambitious enough, big enough, and long-term enough that you don't find yourself changing your mission every couple of years, right? Your strategy changes, but your mission, in my view, ought to remain constant because it's your true north, if you will. So the mission of Berklee, and I'll put it down into just a handful of words, is a lot longer than this, but I'll just boil it down to 3 or 4 words, is to educate and empower artists to better our world. So if you define your mission that broad, then everything else is a tool towards accomplishing that mission. So one of those tools for me is a close integration between what we do and the broader industry. And again, I think it's something that differentiates us from the average run-of-the-mill conservatory. In my view, understanding where the industry is going, or how the industry is in fact blurring with other industries. And my view is that within 10 years, we will no longer be talking about the music industry, the film industry, the gaming industry, the technology industry. They're all coming together. And if you think about it, they're artificial constructs. As human beings, we're expressive. irrespective of the medium, right? I mean, who says that film is necessarily? I mean, it's a different medium than sound, but from the very beginning, music and vision have been the same. It's only through, again, artificial constructs that we've developed these separations, and now they're coming back together. When I went to Berklee 30 years ago, I didn't make videos. I thought of myself as purely somebody who expressed myself through sound, if you will. Yeah. Today, I see the students around me who are 16, 17, 18 years old, and making a video is just as intuitive as making music. So in terms of the startups, we actually have a number of platforms that enable them to plug into the curriculum. And in my view is that we would not be doing our job unless we were exposing our students to all the changes that are happening out there. So whether it's through active collaborations with companies like Facebook and Oculus, where we help our students understand what it's like to compose music for immersive environments, whether it's in fact developing programs that actually help the companies get exposed to our students, right? Because it's a bilateral road, meaning they have as much to learn sometimes from our own students as our students have to learn from them. That one such example is the whole idea of engineering sound for immersive environments like VR or AR. I mean, you may not think about it, but it's absolutely critical with respect to the experience. Well, both sides, when they get together in a room or a lab over 3 or 4 months, they learn from each other. So anyway, we try to have a close integration, and academia is still evolving. I mean, it is being disrupted itself by new technologies. And who says that the future of learning is going to be based in a classroom or based on a 4-year degree that you pay a lot of money for, especially in the United States of America? Again, these are artifices. Learning is learning, and now it's happening through all kinds of channels that don't have to do with a lecture hall and what in English is called a sage on a stage, one teacher, right? You can learn from anyone, anywhere. And for me, these are all good things.
Agree. And talking about entrepreneurship, I've been in touch. So myself, with the link, my company, I'm at the epicenter of MusicTech ecosystem. Like I'm trying to stay up to date with everything going around. But lately, like over the past 3 years, I've met more and more alumni from Berklee in the music startup world. How did you see the change or the shift of mindset in your students in regards to becoming entrepreneurs? And becoming entrepreneurs is not launching a startup, to be clear, because you can build a record company or become a manager. And how do you be a companion to that? You see, what is the role also of Berklee as a stairway for them to grow? How do you see that evolution?
Well, unlike going to MIT or Harvard or Stanford or Oxford or you name the university, or Sorbonne, when you go to Berklee, you're not going to graduate and go and work for an investment bank or for the government or whatever. You will embark on a career, irrespective of your major, that will almost certainly be an entrepreneurial one. As a matter of fact, I believe the number is 91 or 92% of our students really, after they graduate, pursue careers as entrepreneurs. They don't define it that way, but they make their own careers. They make their own jobs. They're not relying on somebody to employ them. I would argue that when people talk about the gig economy, well, There's a reason why they refer to it that way, because gig is obviously a music term, and musicians have been in the gig economy since there were musicians. Since maybe the ancient Greeks would send somebody on an amphitheater and have them play something. That was the prototypical gig worker, if you will. So learning how to think entrepreneurially is critical to your ability to make make a life out of your artistic talent. And it's something that we have to hammer into our students over and over and over again, that it's not just sufficient to be a brilliant songwriter, singer, guitarist, producer, engineer, film scorer. You also have to learn this other language. Many of my colleagues may disagree, and I'm sure there's many people in the audience who may say, no, if you're really amazingly talented, then you don't need anything else. Perhaps that's 1 in a billion, where your talent is so otherworldly that it's recognized. But I think that in a world that's increasingly harder to separate signal from noise, and also in a world where the pipelines are open to anyone and everyone, and also where there's a whole lot more broadcasting than there is receiving, I think you need skills more than just your own talent.
And I think this is a fair point, because I've been involved in many discussions when I was allowed to travel about artist as an entrepreneur, or even artist as a startup, which is like pretty strange as a sentence. But anyway, it could be discussed. And there is still a lot of debate about that. It's not like, it seems to me like in your mind, this is pretty organic to Berklee. It's part of the DNA. Like, also, I guess there is a confusion between artist entrepreneur, like do it yourself, which is not only being an entrepreneur, and launching a startup. But talking about startup, because here at Wallifornia MusicTech, most of the audience are people really into that path of trying to develop services, solution, or use it, driven by tech. What is your role at Berklee, or do we have any lab, or do you have some specific vertical dedicated to grow or help a music startup to grow from the curriculum, or not? How do you that specific type of organization on path or careers?
Multiple ways. And again, the institute that I had originally joined Berklee to found, and called Institute for Creative Entrepreneurship, in some ways we were the anti-institute, because when you think of institutes, you tend to think of them as exclusive, as located in one part of the institution, as ones that are entirely just about people who will pursue the track of a prototypical entrepreneur. We took a bit of a differentiated approach, in the sense that entrepreneurialism ought to be promoted across the entire institution rather than in one area. And also that technology can't just be, in a lab closed off to a handful of people, any more than laptops or computers, or for that matter, ought to be in one room, right? To really create natives, you got to have an environment that is cutting across everything, rather than situated in a building that has the words innovation on the door. As a matter of fact, I always felt that when you do that, you tend to attract the least innovative and the least entrepreneurial people, when you define a room as blah, blah, blah entrepreneurship. So in terms of the way that we do it, it's multi-pronged. We actively seek to embrace and bring new technologies early on, and give ways for the students to experiment and make them their own. So a good example is VR and AR equipment were starting about 5 years ago. We reached out to companies like Facebook, like Samsung, like Sony, and others, in order to actually, bring headsets to the college. And we decided to put them in a place that was highly visible, and also which was actually at the library, and create ways for people to just go and play with them, rather than, say, putting them in one classroom and saying, take this class to learn about VR. We thought that if we create ways for people to just play with them on their own, they would soon enough, if you will, bring their own creative expression and find a way to use the tool in a way that made sense to them, rather than just simply being taught about it, right? Because when you teach it, it feels very sterile, very clinical, versus giving a 5-year-old a toy and say, okay, make something out of this thing. In addition, our foray into areas like China or even the Middle East is also informed by the belief that innovation actually today happens everywhere and anywhere. So in China, we're not going there to set up Berklee in China the way that we would set it up in Boston. We're saying, if we were building Berklee in 2023 in China, what would it be? What would it teach? We're there to, in fact, breathe the air and of the market and have it influence the curriculum, rather than bringing a curriculum into the market. So we decided we're going to locate Berklee in China in Shenzhen, not in Beijing, not in Shanghai, in Shenzhen, which is the technological capital of China, where Tencent is located, Huawei is located, and other tech firms. Apple manufactures most of its equipment there. So again, the desire to engage and understand new technologies and the impact that they will have on creative expression and the future of the industry is critical. The same with the Middle East. In Abu Dhabi, we are going there, and we're not saying let's import wholesale what Berklee does in America into the Middle East, but for those who may not be familiar with the region, it's an exploding area of new content development, of culture, of the literal crossroads that actually date back millennia, right, with a Silk Road of different cultures that also influence the development of new, or not just so much new technologies, but use of technology in ways that sometimes in the Western world we're almost too constricted by old frameworks to let them kind of show us what a truly native application is on these new technologies. So, a good example is in China, music discovery is very different than in America. The relationship between fans and artists is very different. The relationship between technology and users is very different. What can we learn from it?
And super interesting also to have this kind of international perspective, and because it's so important to look outside of the US driven way to approach music industry, which was mostly the driving force so far. And there is so many so many perspectives that needs to be taken into account, like as you said. To discover and create, to distribute. Yeah.
We talk about entrepreneurialism, and we talk about technology, and we talk about artistry. Well, current setbacks aside, and I don't want to make this a political statement, but the truth is, globalization is here to stay. We are an interconnected world. And if the coronavirus has taught us anything, is that we are truly interconnected, and we're truly all the same. So the ability for us as an institution to create a global network that is seamless, that enables a student over the course of their education, which, by the way, is not just 4 years, it is a lifetime, but to go and, say, live in different parts of the world, experience different cultures, learn from each of these cultures something different, and then make it their own, is a critical part of your ability to succeed in the future, because your career, if you're from Belgium, if you're from Belgium, I'm from Cyprus, they're small countries. You almost have no option but to go out of the country to make a career. But you could be from Belgium and your market may be tomorrow in the United Arab Emirates. It could be somewhere in Africa. It could be in Europe. It could be in America. That's where your business flourishes or your artistry flourishes. The more you know, the less constricted you are. Look at Africa. It's a developing market. Wow. 65% of the people there are under the age of 30. Broadband penetration is increasing. There's a lot of evidence that media consumption is based more on age than on income. So large consumer of content, unless we get our students to actively be thinking about these markets, they'll all think that the only door that exists is in Los Angeles or New York City. Well, that's the 20th century.
So, yeah. And we have 5 minutes left, Panos. And I wanted to tackle a little bit about your innovation also project, but maybe not as a conclusion, just because we mentioned in the former panel, which was about value, and we talk a lot about metadata and data. And I was the guy to mention Open Music Initiative. And any updates or just sharing a thought on this pretty unique initiative you led, even if maybe some updates, but just a background for the audience, to show also what Berklee can initiate in terms of concrete potentially project in regards to new technology in music.
Yeah, I'll make it really simple since we don't have a whole lot of time.
Yeah, I know. Sorry for that.
But since 4 years ago, we've been leading an effort with our good friends at MIT. I'm talking about technology. MIT is less than a mile away from Berklee. So we actually offer courses together, a high school program together. And along with MIT Connection Science, which is their foremost data science group, we've been leading an effort since 4 years ago called Open Music that aims to create a shared way of identifying rights owners across the entire supply chain of the digital music industry. Without going into all kinds of arcane issues related to the music industry and the complexity of copyright, the idea is that it's an open protocol similar to TCP/IP that creates interoperability around across the ecosystem. Because of our neutral position, because of our respect across the industry, we've been able to put together almost now 300 different organizations and startups that have joined in the effort, including all the major record labels, all the major streaming services, including Spotify, Pandora, YouTube, SoundCloud, Netflix, Facebook, Warner Music, Universal Music, Sony Music, big music publishers, technology companies like IBM. And in terms of next steps, in fact, we have our students between MIT and Berklee have created a prototype that any one of your registrants can access to build applications on. And we were releasing the beta in early September. But the original beta enables students from Berklee to license their music seamlessly through the platform to film school students across the U.S. in different colleges. So we're starting similar to perhaps the start of Facebook. I don't know, whatever it is, 13, 14 years ago, through a closed university network. Yeah, now maybe Facebook is not the world's most popular name right now. But we're starting initially with a closed network of university students being able to identify and seamlessly license music using smart contracts. And then we plan to open it up. But if any of your registrants have applications that use music and they're interested in experimenting with an easy way to access music without jumping through all the hoops of music licensing, then they can go to open-music.org and get more information in terms of how they can develop prototype apps that build on the protocol. And it's an open protocol, so you can simply embed the code into any of your apps.
Thanks, because it was a brief description of a long process and complex thing brought to a simple application. And I think it's super interesting to see that coming in September. Yeah.
And you know, Yvan, innovation is both fast and slow.
Yeah.
You know,
I know that.
What we perceived often as super fast, it's a product often of decades of work. You know, I mean, we perceive the internet as something that you can innovate on super fast, but to create the layer that made the internet possible took decades. And you know, the TCP/IP protocol was agreed upon in the 80s, but that was after 20 years of work from the 60s.
And this is what we call usually also the education role, because we need to educate ourselves to these new possibilities, and this is
absolutely
so important. That's why education is so needed in our music innovation disruption. Sometimes we are too much talking about the future and the crystal ball thing. Like, calm down, guys. We need to manipulate that and take the time to be able to make a difference. And this is really what I appreciate with your work at Berklee and with the community you built. So
my advice to any startup who's listening is that prepare and build a long runway. Things will take longer than you think, and then when they do take off, they tend to take off very fast. But as Peter Drucker said, most startups die from indigestion, not starvation, because when they take off, most people are not ready for it. But they're also what they're not ready for is the long process of getting to take off. So that's why I said it's both fast and slow.
And I would say as a conclusion, but it's pretty much comparable to artist career path in a way. There is so many comparisons to be made with an artist in a studio and a startup in a garage, trying to make a difference and have an impact on society beyond become rich. And they need to be prepared about the same thing as you described, right?
I like to say that there's only two things that you start in a garage: a band or a company.
Yeah.
and they're the same thing. Having done both in my life, I will tell you they're very much the same thing. And as a matter of fact, I co-wrote a book that's coming out in April of 21 on Penguin Books in Europe with the global creative director of IDEO, the innovation and design firm that pioneered design thinking. But it's all around how musical mindsets, what they can teach innovators and innovators to be. And we use very cool stories from people like Pharrell and Justin Timberlake and Jimmy Iovine, and a number of other famous and not so famous people to illustrate how these mindsets are applicable in ways beyond just say simple performance. Mark the date down and check it out. I think it's pretty cool.
We can drop the mic now.
And
go back to the garage and build some stuff.
We have original interviews with all these folks, and it's amazing. The insights are incredible.
And I can say as a last testimonial, Berklee is one of the most inspiring music garage I ever visited. Because I can something you told about this kind of connection and between technology, art, and artistry. When you go to Valencia, you have like musicians sitting on the floor with a laptop, but with the saxophone on the left, and they go out from a rehearsal studio straight to the coding room to develop a new piece of a new platform. It's pretty inspiring, and it's not only a kind of a fame movie kind of cliche. It's happening. It's happening for real, because people like you design it to be effective, not only to be inspiring and buzzy. I think it's it. So I respect that a lot, and I guess our audience appreciate it. What you shared today with us. So keep rocking, keep pushing boundaries, and keep cooking good stuff, because this is a private joke. But thanks.
Well, my hope was that I would have been in Belgium right now, which is when you and I first talked about this.
Yes,
because our graduation in Valencia is this week. But unfortunately, it didn't happen. But hopefully next year, Yvan.
Sure, we'll make this happen for sure. And until then, take care. And thanks again, Panos.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.